Star Wars Rebels Season 2, Episode 13, Legends of Lasat. Now, this was definitely a fun episode because we finally got to see something about Zeb, and it wasn't a ton of backstory on him. We didn't get like any flashbacks or anything of his home planet and stuff like that, but we certainly got a really amazing episode. Zeb was kind of the character that I really wanted to see some more information on because he and Hera were the ones that had kind of the least info about their backstories, and I wanted to see a lot about his because he was deemed as the last of his kind, which I don't remember which episode this was. I think it may have actually been in the last episode because that was so focused on Sabine. But there was definitely some episode where in one of my reviews I mentioned he's probably not the last of his kind, and I definitely want to see about that. And that's exactly what we got in this episode from the very beginning, which I certainly loved. There weren't a ton, at least not until the ending, but I really loved it. It was very cool to see these two characters come in. It showed it right there, like he's not the last of his kind, and they brought in a lot of good exposition. It wasn't that sort of clunky exposition, excuse me, where it's just like, here's all this information, which personally I wouldn't have hated anyway because, with Rebels, I always feel like, every time I watch an episode of Rebels, it feels like it's 5 minutes long because they have a commercial break. I swear it feels like every 2.5 minutes sometimes. Like, they always have a break right after the first opening scene, and then it just seems like there's so many breaks in this show that every episode ultimately comes out as like 15 minutes or something to me. And that could be right. I don't know. I feel like there's so many commercials. But right from the beginning, we see these other Lasat. And it was cool. They give information that Zeb used to be a captain, which is pretty interesting. They give like his full name, which I don't remember. Except for his last name was like Ocelios, I believe. But that was really cool. I was like, alright, he used to be a captain. Even Hera didn't know any of that information. So it showed how much he really kept hidden about his past. And then when he talks to Ezra, we really find out why, because Zeb wasn't just this random captain. He was like the captain. He was the one in charge of pretty much protecting all of his people, and he felt that he hardly felt like he was even worth existing at this point because he failed his entire people. And I like that aspect of his character. It was cool to see him vulnerable, really, because it's Zeb. We don't, Zeb isn't vulnerable. Zeb's the guy who just destroys people. So that was really fun to watch. I love seeing that little conversation between him, Zeb, and Ezra, where he's like, I failed my people. I was meant to protect them, and I screwed up. This bomb went off, and then when I woke up, everything was basically just gone, and I lost everyone. I lost all my people, and I was the one who was supposed to protect them. So he felt terrible. And I love that idea. It was fun to see him vulnerable. We learned another name for the Force, which I thought was pretty cool. And we got a different, like another prophecy, which was based around Zeb, which came out really cool. I loved the way that they did it. And we actually got to see his gun turn into like an actual bow, which kind of blew my mind. I was like, holy crap, this is like a full-on weapon. It's not just a gun, which I think we all thought it was, and then it just transforms and he's pulling pieces and twisting stuff, and it's this big staff with like a lightning rod tip. It's like a lightning trident basically. And I was like, that's amazing, like that's really cool. And I'd love to see him use that a lot more. And he combines the lightning rod with the stone on this image that Chopper's putting off, and he finds where his planet is meant to be. And I love that idea because Zeb is one of the characters where in the show, there are only really two characters. It's Kanan and Ezra, and they're like the Force characters. But in this episode, Zeb really fell into that role of being a Force type character. And I love that. And he believed in this prophecy, and he believed in his own destiny. And I love the way that they did it. It was really fun to watch. And then we have them going to uncharted territory, beyond, charted space. And they get followed. Of course, they get followed. Callus is always... Callus, honestly, I feel like at this point is like maybe 80% of the time they've met with Callus, it's been he's in his ship and they're in their ship and they go their separate ways by the end. I feel like at this point, it's been like 80% of their confrontations have actually been ship to ship, and they've only heard each other's voices at this point. But of course, he does show up. Also, Hondo, I have totally skipped over Hondo. We get to see Hondo come in. He's the one who is Ezra's informant in this episode. And of course, Hondo is Hondo. He helped him out a little bit. And then he totally betrayed them. Was like, oh, you know, I heard there's rewards for giving out information against the rebels. So of course he turns on them in the end, and it's Hondo. So not much to be expected there. I was kind of hoping it would end up being Lando Calrissian. When Ezra mentioned it, was like, oh, it's just one of our contacts. I was like, I figured I was right about it being a smuggler, but I was of course hoping it would be Lando. But it was fun seeing Hondo again. He's one of the characters where it's like it's cool seeing him, but obviously he's not on like he's not like Lando level or Leia or you know or really anyone else from the old series. I mean, I doubt we'd see Obi-Wan, but if Obi-Wan came in, he'd be like the number 2 character to come into the show as Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I would love to see that happen. I don't know if that ever will, but that would be really awesome if it did. But we got Hondo. Not that I hate Hondo or anything like that. He was definitely silly and funny. But it leads to all this craziness, and then we get to just uncharted space, and they're going up against whatever they called it. I forgot what they called it, but basically it was a vortex that multiple vortexes that would rip them apart because there were so many different um, wells of gravity that it would just tear the ship into a bunch of different directions. But Zeb believed in the prophecy, and he got the ship through. I love the part where they sent the TIE fighters after them, and they flew in, and they kind of just disintegrated. It was like they flew in and just went and just started to kind of break apart. I thought that was really cool. And so of course they make it through. It was a very well done shot, and like they're going into, it looked like they were flying into a painting, which is probably one of my favorite things about it. Like they're in uncharted space, so it's like all this darkness, like typical space, and we see Callus in his ship, and they're in their ship going towards what's basically like this very artistic painting of a bunch of swirls. And it was just like, I think it was one point and there was just a really big wide shot, and that was probably my favorite scene, and the music was really well done. And they make it through the system, and the ship is protected by the lightning and stuff, and they get through, and everyone kind of passes out and stuff, but they wake up on the inside, and we find out that Zeb has found the original home of his people, and they send the two Lasat down there, and Sabine brings up the question of them being alone, and he's like, there's a bunch of them down there. So that was really cool. Hera mentions, like, now that, we can consider this space charted, so we can come back here whenever we want. And I just love the way they did this episode. It was very well done. Very good Force type of episode, but not I mean, it was the Force. I mean, they mentioned the Force has many names. So it was a Force-centric episode, but it wasn't with our typical Force-centric characters. And I love that idea, and it was very fun to watch Zeb, like I said, in a more vulnerable state where he's like way beyond anything that he's comfortable with. Like, he's left that life behind because he really thought he was the last of his people, and even when he finds other people, he doesn't really want to be around them because he's more hurt by what he did or what he failed to do in the past than anything else. So he still tries to separate himself a little bit in the beginning because of his feelings towards himself and how he kind of disrespects himself, really. And I love that idea. So it was a great, great episode. Just love the music. Just a very great ending. I think like I felt like the music was going on for a long time. Like the scene where they're just flying through, that seemed like it was almost 10 minutes, and I was just enjoying it. And like I said, the music was well done. Visually looked great. Like they're going from all this blackness into like just this great color spectrum. And it was just really fun to watch. I really loved this episode. I think it's definitely one of the episodes I'd been waiting for, getting to see something about Zeb and learning about him. And we get, like I said, a little bit of backstory. I guess technically we didn't get enough, but there's still the Zeb Callus actual rivalry, which is mentioned a lot more in season 1, I feel, than it has been so far. But there's still that, where Zeb does feel that Callus is like the rival, really. And I want to see that come up a lot more, because as often as they meet, they don't bring up that rivalry nearly enough for me. So I want to see them have more hand-to-hand stuff, and it's in the trailers a lot. There's the one scene where Zeb pulls Callus out of a ship. I want to see that scene because I think that'll be a good episode because they have that rivalry, which is when they first met in the beginning of the series. That was like the first thing they talked about. Is like Callus was like the forefront to destroying my people, and I want to kill him for that. So I want to see a lot more of that come up. And I still, like I said, of course, I loved exactly what we got in this episode. It didn't need to change one bit, but for whatever comes next, as far as Zeb's background and development, I'd like to see him go up against Callus again. Maybe he won't win this time like he did last time, but maybe, he lost last time. Maybe it'll be a draw this time. Maybe he will win, but of course he won't get to kill Callus because he's our recurring villain. He's like our recurring sub-villain, I guess, because of course we have, like, Vader, and, we haven't really seen anyone else. It's mostly been Callus, and we've seen, the Inquisitors have been coming in a lot, which, of course, that's great because they have lightsabers, but, Callus is always going to be our guy who comes in and out and almost gets them, but doesn't even make it off his own ship or something like that. But I really love this episode. Looking forward to whatever we get next. I wish it was an actual preview, because I like to know what's coming up next, but I don't want to look it up because I don't want to just read it. I want to just visually see it, because when you read it, you always end up getting more information than you would from just really vague clips and stuff. So I prefer to just see the promos, but it's fun. I know I'm going to enjoy whatever episode is coming up. I know there's a lot of crazy stuff coming up, and I mentioned this before with the big trailer that they had come out. I can't wait to see that stuff. That probably won't happen for quite a while because it's based on that trailer. Some of that stuff was just too epic to happen very soon, but I'm really looking forward to it. Definitely a great episode. Of course, though, want to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And I've already asked this before, but I am going to ask it again, even though it's basically been 2 episodes in a row. But now that we have gotten more info on Zeb, for the next episode that focuses on one of our main characters, who do you want it to focus on? We've gotten quite a bit of stuff from Sabine. I think she's honestly gotten more than anyone out of our group, oddly enough, even out of Ezra. I mean, he lost his parents, and that's pretty much it. And with Kanan, he was in the Clone Wars, and they mentioned his master's name. I believe they mentioned her name in the last episode. I know he had a female master, and that I mostly knew from the cover of the very first comic where that talks about him during Order 66, so I knew that before they actually said it. But I would still like to know a lot about Hera. She is the one that's missing some information. Even with the episode when she talked about how she grew up and why she wanted to be a pilot, even after that episode, that was like one bit of her backstory, and Zeb still had more than her from his first meeting with Callus, where it's like, oh, last of his people, this is his rival, he can't defeat his rival. We got like a lot of pretty big things in that first confrontation with them. And Hera's just been the captain, so I want to see her backstory. I'd love to see some episodes, even if it doesn't focus on like just one character and like this is where they come from. I would love to see how the group actually formed. Like Zeb kind of mentions it a little in this episode, how he met Kanan, but all he really said was like, I was as good as dead until Kanan found me, and that was pretty much it. So I would still love an episode that focuses on how some of these members met. I mean, whether it's Kanan and Hera, Kanan and Zeb, Kanan and Sabine, Sabine and Hera. Obviously, at some point, it would be 2 people, meaning I would assume Sabine joined last, but I'm just going off of age, which makes no sense. Anyone could have joined at any random time. But I do want to see how this team formed. I want to see that, and I'm sure we'll get that eventually, and that probably won't happen for a while because they want to focus on some of the other really big things that are going to be happening, but I'd really love that. I'd like to see, when did Hera and Kanan really form this team? What attracted them to each other? Because they are together, and that's something else. I hadn't talked about this lately, but I hadn't talked about it at all this season, but they really haven't shown them much as a couple, really. Like, they focused on that a lot more in the first season, where they'd have their little moments where, like, I don't think they ever actually kissed or anything, but they do mention like they are together. And I feel like it's not like that in this season. It seems like they're just all in a team, and they kind of strayed away from that. And I'm pretty sure, unless I'm forgetting something, I'm pretty sure they do mention that they are, basically a couple. And I feel like they've really strayed away from that a lot. And I'd like to see how they met, why they fell for each other. Where was Kanan in his life? Because obviously the whole Order 66 thing, I have to wonder if there's like a weird time in his life where he was kind of tempted to almost, go to the dark side a little bit because of just all that madness that happened. So I'd love to know how they met. That more than anything, I'd love to know how they met, and also Hera's backstory in general, more than just I wanted to be a pilot because of this. I'd like to know a little bit more about it, but I do want to know what you guys thought about this episode, and who you want to have a big focus on, or what pair, or even if you want all three of the characters. If you want Sabine, or I guess a trio is still four people without Ezra. So if you want three of the characters, or whatever storylines you want, as far as background info that we still haven't received, definitely want to know which one you guys are looking forward to the most. And like I said, whatever you enjoyed about this episode or didn't. I'm sure there's people who didn't like this episode. I don't know how you couldn't enjoy it. Maybe not enough action, I guess, but didn't bother me whatsoever. I loved it. I mean, we got a great It was actually, I think it was actually a fairly even split. It was like very action heavy in the beginning. There's a bunch of shooting, and we got to see Kanan and Ezra use their lightsabers. It was only for deflecting, but their lightsabers turned on, and I was just like, oh, this is best. This is the best. So obviously, they can just do like this with lightsabers on, and I love the episode. But even after the action slowed down, it was definitely an amazing episode for me. But like I said, I want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.